Biz 2320 Computing 2, and this is a very quick video on getting and setting up Spyder. So if you log into the VLE and look at the module website, then you'll see there are in fact some sections on getting started with Python on the cluster machines, and also if you want to install Python onto your own computer. I'm going to show you the current recommended distribution for Python. So Python is freely downloadable. You can install it on on your own machine completely for free. Including all its sort of various packages and dependencies, it can be quite a complicated thing to install from scratch. But there are a number of companies who make what's called a Python distribution, so a whole package of Python plus the Spyder editor plus all the modules you're going to need. And the one I currently recommend is called Anaconda Python. So if you just Google for Anaconda Python, you should find that the first hit you get to is from this company called Continuum. And if you go to their download page, then it's going to look something like this. One of the reasons I recommend Anaconda is that it gives you a single install package that you can download a version for Windows, or you can download a version for Mac or Linux, and everything comes with it, and everything's in a version that works together. You are of course completely free to set things up how you want yourself, and particularly people who use Linux and have their own Linux laptops may well prefer to go and use whatever distribution they're using and have all of its versions of Python and so on. The other thing to make you aware of is that there are currently two main versions of Python in use. So there's Python 2.7 and then Python 3.5, and it's just very recently been replaced by 3.6. Now this is quite important. If you are in academic year 2016-17, then you're going to want Python 2.7. That's what you should have used in your first year. If you're in academic years after that, so 17-18 and onwards, then we're going to be switching to Python 3, so you should download Python 3 versions. And as you can see, it gives you an installer package for Windows, for Mac OS, and also for Linux. So since most people will be using Windows, it's very straightforward. If it's the 2.7 version you want, you have either a 64-bit installer or a 32-bit installer. Most people running modern laptops, things that have been bought in the last couple of years, are probably running a 64-bit version of Windows. If you're not sure, then 32-bit is safe because it'll work on 64-bit Windows and 32-bit Windows, whereas 64-bit Python won't work if you're running on a 32-bit Windows version. So probably you could get away with 64-bit, but if in doubt, go for the 32-bit. And the same is true for Python 3.5, as this is 2017-18 or onwards. And what you want to do is just download the relevant installer, and it will give you a installer file. It'll end up a .exe, and then you can just double click it and follow the defaults, and it will install Python into your C drive in a folder called Python. I should say, if you've already installed a version of Python, you probably want to uninstall that version before you start trying to install the new version, otherwise it can get a little bit confusing as to what's going on. And there are similar procedures for the Mac OS and the Linux versions. The Mac OS versions, you have a choice of a graphical installer or a command line installer. I would normally probably recommend the graphical installer, and then you can double click the .pkg file and that will set off and run. If you're on Linux, then it's all command line installers, and again, either 64-bit if you're running 64-bit Linux, or 32-bit if you're on 32-bit Linux, and hopefully you know which it is you're running. We generally assume that people who are running Linux are a little bit more savvy about what they're doing on their computers. Okay, so you should install install Anaconda Python, and that'll give you the Spyder editor environment. It'll give you Python, it'll give you matplotlib, which you use for graphics, it'll give you the scientific Python packages and the numerical Python packages, everything you need. Okay, so having done that, then how I would normally go and set Spyder up. So I'm recording this on my Linux desktop, but I have myself added Spyder to my taskbar. But this is basically the same, irrespective of which version you're using. So I'm showing you here, this is Spyder version 3. Now, a very important thing here when you fire up Spyder for the first time, just check here in the console that it does say it's Python 2.7 or 3 point something, depending which academic you're in. So if you're in, this is academic year 16-17, then you want 2.7, and if it's after that, you're going to want the version 3.5 or 3.6. Okay, out of the box, Spyder is reasonably well set up. There are a few things that I would normally suggest you go and do. So I go to the Tools menu and Preferences. So that's in the same place on the Windows version. Under Mac OS, it puts the preferences in the normal place you'd expect for a Mac OS application. Okay, it gives you quite a lot of complicated preferences. There's a few things I would always go and change. So first of all, in the IPython console, under Graphics tab, so I click IPython console and Graphics, I would change that from inline to automatic. What that's going to do is going to make your graph windows, when you start using Matplotlib, pop up in a separate window out of the console, which makes them, which you can then zoom and pan and save as image files. So it's just generally a little bit easier. The other thing I would do is in the help window, I would generally turn on the automatic connections to all three things. This is going to mean that as you type stuff, you're going to get some help about the functions you're using as you go along. That's the main things I think it's worth to change. You can go around and play around with syntax colouring, and I mean, generally the defaults and everything else work as you'd expect them to. The only thing is that before the changes take effect, you have to restart your console. If you're using the latest version of Anaconda and Spyder 3, you can just click the close console window and it will come back. If you do this and you notice it's saying kernel died unexpectedly and repeat that several times, don't worry, nothing's wrong. It's just that your Python is taking a little bit longer than expected to restart. If you sit there and wait, it'll all come back nicely, back to the start again. So what you can see, for example, is that if I start, let's try importing some a function. So I'm just going to import OS. If I do os dot, let's see, change directory, if I can hit Control I, and the help window comes up and tells me. If I start opening a bracket, then it'll work out, and you'll see it gives you the little help file. You'll also see it'll pop up a little tooltip as I go. The other useful thing that people seem to not quite spot in using Spyder, and particularly the IPython shell, is that if you hit tab, it'll try and work out what you were wanting to talk about. So you saw there, if I said mk and hit tab, comes as I said, did I mean mkdir, which means make a directory, or these various other functions, which I won't go into right now. The same is true in the editor. OS dot, and it goes, oh look, here are all the things you can complete with. Change dir is change directory. Hit tab there, open the bracket, and you see the help function has come up straight away. The other useful thing you can do is you can have the variable explorer. So this then connects variables you create in the console and shows you what value they have and also what type they are. And you see it changes around as it goes along. So that can be quite handy. We'll be using that later when we come to explore how you explore how the programs are running, so it'll let us keep track of what's going on. And the File Explorer tab obviously is quite handy because that lets you open files directly in Spyder, so you don't have to go File, Open. You can move around and find where your files are. The other thing I would say is that when you're doing your coursework for Computing 2, I would strongly recommend that you save your data somewhere that is going to be backed up. In particular, you should know that you cannot get an extension for coursework because your computer crashed and you've lost your program. You should use the university's M drive to keep important stuff on, because A, well, that's very well backed up, but also B, if anything does go wrong with the M drives, the university will give you an extension because it's the university's fault if the M drives go and lose data. So my recommendation is always make sure you save it somewhere it's being backed up. You can use things like OneDrive or Dropbox are good things to use, and keep a copy on the university's M drive for security. Don't rely on USB keys, and remember that if you've got a laptop, you might get unlucky and somebody might steal it, and think how much you're going to lose if that happens. So that's a word to the wise in advance of a problem, I hope. The other thing you can do, of course, with Spyder is you can go around and rearrange the windows to your heart's content. You just click the thing to make it a separate window, move it round, drop it roughly where you want it. It can get a little bit tricky sometimes to get things into the right place, but it does get there in the end. It can help. Whoops. You see, you move things around endlessly. It can be a good idea if you can resize the windows to be a bit smaller before you start dragging them around. So you can have endless fun rearranging them. If things get very, very confusing, you can always go to the View menu and ask it to go and put things back to how you want them. Or indeed it'll let you pick, if you're used to using, say, MATLAB from another thing, you can go and make it look more like MATLAB, or however you want to have it looking. You can also turn on various different windows. You can play around with all of that. Anyway, you can set that up how you like. The main thing I think I'd recommend is that you use the Tools and the Preferences menu to make your graphics come out as a separate window. Okay, so that'll be enough for this video then.